What's happening, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Welcome back here to the studio. Charlie Waymar, Ultimate Studios, Inc., Recording Ninja Workshops, and I am joined by a very special guest, Sir Barry Rudolph.
Hey, everybody.
Barry, thanks for being here, man.
You're welcome.
We're going to get into a lot of cool topics, but before we get into anything, kill that. The man over here to my right, I got a special announcement. This dude, come on, you got to pop your head in here. Just don't knock this on. This lucky little bastard right here is going to be a U.S. citizen. He just passed his tests. Tal, you're killing it, brother. Woohoo! All right, now on to today's. We have a lot of things that we can cover, and we may have to do this more than one time. So, Barry, first off, I got to pull up something here.
Uh-oh. Should I leave the room?
No. You guys, if you don't know Barry, you have had a fantastic career. You've worked with Hall & Oates, you've worked with Pat Benatar, Rod Stewart, the Corrs, tons of great bands.
Yeah.
You're also an educator. He teaches at Musicians Institute. He has a lot of great stuff on his website, barryrudolph.com. I'm from Kansas, English, not my first language. barryrudolph.com. You've got reviews of gear.
Right,
You've
lots
got
of reviews.
recall sheets.
Right.
All sorts of things that are helpful.
Tips and tricks.
Yep.
Funny stuff. Advice to the lovelorn.
I'm going to ask some questions on that after the broadcast.
Yeah. It's that, barryrudolph.com, and also I have another site called Gear Lust, L-U-S-T. And that's Gear Lust is more, it's sort of like reviews and stuff that just doesn't fit into the magazine format or doesn't fit, the reviews. Some of them are reviews, some are stories, some are just like goofy stuff. Like I wrote a thing about a guy made a plate, a reverb plate out of a sheet of wood.
What? Oh, I got to check that out.
It's called Tree Verb. So it's just wacky stuff. It's called gearlust.com.
Cool. I'm going to check that out when we're done, man. So let's start with one thing. We have a few ideas. One hot topic that we've had around here has been just general workflow, and getting, whether it's, for me, it's a big thing. What do you do when let's say you're starting to work with a band, or you're a band getting ready to go into the studio? There's more than one way. We could look at a band, how to, pick your producer or what to do or how to prepare. But as a producer, how do you get ready to work with a band?
All right. Well, I think it's important to really understand that everyone's different. Every band is going to be different. Maybe it's a long rehearsal period. You're going through the songs. You're working on arrangements. You're working on keys of the song. You're working on tempo. Everything that you have to kind of like the pre-production is really deep for me, really long, because I would like the band to come into the studio and basically play like a live set almost.
Right.
So remember, the more that you can record at the same time, the better off you are in so many ways, budget-wise, feeling, vibe, everything. So I try to do as much as I can. I realize people don't have their great day. They may want to do a part over here and there and so forth, and I get that. But the more that you can come in there and just play this stuff down, it's going to feel better. And
so pre-production then is
big.
So walk me through that. Obviously not everybody has like a budget of, Hall & Oates to do lock out a place for a while. So what would you do, say, with a newer band that maybe doesn't have a giant budget? How would you approach the pre-production process?
I would want to attend quite a few rehearsals of all the songs that we're going to record. Maybe we do an edit process where maybe they're looking at these 4 songs. We get in there and I go, I think this song number 3, I don't know about that song. I think maybe we could look at another one, or only do 3 songs.
Right.
So at the same time as you're honing what their performance is, you're getting them so that they sound good. You're working on arrangements, all in rehearsal studio. So,
do you record that process at all? Do you try to, or is that
I don't think that it's. You could, just a boombox recording or phone or something. I don't think that that's so important, other than just for reference. Maybe there's an idea. Somebody comes up with a certain kind of guitar lick or a certain feel, and you have something recording that, and you can refer to it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so that would be good.
So what's something that you see? What would you tell a band prepping for that? Is there any common kind of mistakes that you see, or lack of preparedness from anybody you've worked with? Is there any?
Again, I'm kind of looking at, okay, what's going on here? I want to know, where is the kernel, where is the part of them that I want to capture in the studio? What is it about them that I want to jump out or come across on the record? What parts of them? Maybe the singer's really good. Maybe they just groove really hard. Maybe the songs are really good, or hopefully all of the above.
Right.
So I'm looking at that stuff and trying to figure out how can we get this from the rehearsal studio into the studio and get good sound. So I'm also looking at the sound of the instruments. Well, maybe you ought to use the Les Paul on that one instead of the Strat. Things like that. All these things are sort of happening at the same time. Most bands, I've got a lot of that stuff dialed in already.
Right.
But sometimes they get blind, or they just get deaf to what they're doing. They're doing it so much over and over again, they just don't have.
It gets hard to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, well, they keep pounding away on that. I'm also looking at the key of the song, and where the singer, sometimes it just sounds better when the singer's can really feel them straining to get to those top notes.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, sometimes that's what you want to hear. You want to hear that, and maybe you have to punch it in later, and maybe there's some tuning that has to happen. But I mean, that's the stuff. What's going to make people be attracted to this whole thing?
Right.
That's got to come across in rehearsal. That has to come across to me in rehearsal, because if it doesn't, then it's not going to come across in recording.
Right. There's nothing you're going to do production-wise on the back end that's going to make a mediocre song great.
Yeah.
You can make it sound great.
You can make it sound great, and you're polishing, and it it's going to be acceptable. It'll be nice, but yeah.
I remember seeing you. Oh man, this must have been. It might have been right before you actually started working at MI, or right after you started. You were doing a mix thing in Studio E, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember the track, what it was, but you were specifically talking about there was one or two tracks in there that the artist wanted to definitely be there. Yeah. But you were like, this is not working. Like, oh, man, it's not recorded well. So, but your whole thing was, instead of looking at it like, oh, this isn't recorded well, this sucks, you were like, well, I just figured you took it how it was and you made it into a thing. And you basically looked at it from a positive aspect.
I call it the Chicago mixing. In other words, you make the mistakes, turn them up.
Right.
It's sort of like, hey, you're given this stuff and you try to make it the best it can sound, and hopefully it's either it goes by. It's not a coffer. We used to call a coffer.
Right.
You know what a coffer is? When you're playing it for the A&R guy.
Oh yeah.
And there's like a really bad flat note or something, you go you cough right through it, and
that's great.
Coffer. Yeah. So
I'm gonna remember that.
All right, I think we got some text. Somebody.
That's a good question, Tao. This comes from some recordings we had done sometime last year, and we got in the mix process. And have you ever? I mean, if you're starting start to finish, honestly, you have more control over that. Yeah. But this comes down to kind of dealing with clients, which is a whole psychology. Probably from more like the mixer side of things, that something has been recorded a certain way, and all of a sudden, let's say it's a guitar and it was recorded with, like you said, a Strat, right? Yeah. And you get to the mix and somebody's, man, I wish I sound like a Les Paul. Yeah. Can you make my guitars? I mean, how do you might not deal with too much of that type of clientele. I don't know. I get it every once in a while. So how do you manage then, after you've gotten through your recording process and all that, you're in the mix process, how do you deal with what the song needs, what the artist is asking you for, and then sometimes deciphering what the artist really means?
Wow.
I know that's kind of
it's kind of mind reading, and
it's a huge question.
With regard to the guitar, I mean, nowadays everyone takes a wire, also takes a direct,
right?
And so they have that direct signal clean, and they just reamp it with whatever they want to do. You're talking about a performance. You're talking about the sound. I mean, if you can't overdub it, I assume it can't be.
No,
the guitar player has died or left the
yeah,
band,
or whatever it is. You know how
yeah.
much, because you only have a certain amount of things you can change. Drums you can obviously drop samples in, which change the vibe. But if somebody's asking, I guess the question, let me rephrase it, is
with
when you're getting asked to
reverb,
do something
with enough reverb. I don't know. You make a meal out of it in some way. Reamp it or run it through a pedal or run it through a plug-in or just twist it up.
But if you're, yeah, which that's cool. That actually could work. But I guess a better way for me to phrase that question would be, how would you deal with when you get an artist that's asking you for something that is not what you have? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. In other words, diplomacy.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like, without being disrespectful or hey man, do you really want me to tell you about this guitar part? You just sort of have to kind of like tuck it in. I mean, if that's what they're looking for. Again, this is a matter of control. If you're going to be the producer, you should just say, look, we need to do that part over.
Right. Yeah, that's usually always the easiest instead of trying
say,
to
look,
polish something.
It's not that you don't suck. So anyway.
Okay, that answers the question, at least for me. Because that comes up, that sometimes it gets hard to, you get an artist.
You have to think of what's best for the song, what's
Right.
best for the record, what's best for the artist. And when they're convinced that you're right about that and they can hear it, and I think when they hear other musicians play, or maybe the same play the same bit, and they hear how much better it sounds over there, then they'll come around right away.
Right.
They're really egotistical, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Or you get some that I've run into it when, especially when you start dealing with reference tracks, because you're trying to, I try to get into the artist's head a little bit to try to head off some possible issues, but sometimes I get the ones that send me just their favorite album, and it doesn't really
nothing to do with what you're
you got to
doing.
connect the dots for me.
Nothing to do with what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, they're sending you a ballad and you're mixing a metal.
Yeah. Why did you send me Barbra Streisand when we're doing Slipknot?
Yeah.
You got to connect the dots here for me.
All right.
So how much do you do more mixing now than the tracking side?
Yeah, it's I have a studio and people send me drives or whatever, Dropbox or whatever, and then ask me to take a look at stuff.
That's a perfect segue. This man knows his segues. Let's look at, and this will lead us into the next question.
Oh, look
bring
at that.
up.
Yeah.
Let's bring up a few photos there of.
Yeah, that's
his setup.
That's like the listening position right now. I got the ultra wide, although is not fully filled out. I fixed that, so now the flat panel is full 29-inch.
Oh,
ultra
nice.
Wide. Yeah,
and we'll talk about the fader port in just a second, because I know that's a piece of gear that you really dig.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's pull up another one.
Oh, so there's the outboard racks. I'm up to 4 racks now. You can see on the left. On the left there, left of the desktop, you see, I call it the digital rack. It's the top is right below the digital readout. There is the benchmark media analog digital converter on the right.
Oh, where's that?
It's right below the Furman on the left-hand rack.
Oh, right there.
They're side by
nice.
side. They're half rack. So right above the silver thing, which is called a SSL X patch. I'll talk about what that thing is in a minute. But so benchmark ADC, which clocks the Pro Tools system, Pro Tools 12.8.1. The left of the ADC is a DAC, benchmark digital analog converter. And then the silver thing with the 4 XLRs is a SSL X patch. That is a 16 by 16 matrix out of the SSL matrix. It was a product I don't think they were very successful with, but what it is, it's a digitally controlled patch bay.
Oh, cool.
So you can make up cross patches and store setups.
Oh, nice.
So what I use that for is to route all the mic preamp outputs into the analog digital converter. It's a stereo input. So
okay.
So I can call up any of my mic pre's and route them into the ADC for recording.
Oh, cool. Which we're gonna your setup is something I want to talk about.
And then you want to rest of the gear in the rack or go on or
actually what is my favorite pieces, the ones I asked about earlier, were those retros.
Okay, so the stay level on the far right there is a fantastic piece of gear. Phil Moore at Retro. He's such a he's such a creative and respectful person of the era that thing came out in the 50s. It was used in AM broadcast. Mm-hmm. And so that thing sounds just unbelievable. It's a variable mu limit or compressor. Awesome on vocals, awesome on bass, although I use, to the left of it is a little double wide, which is a retro.
Is that the 500 series rack?
Double wide. Also tubes. That is used for, I use that for bass. So.
Oh, nice. And then you've got a couple of the
warm audio, the leveling amps,
and is that some Sunset Sound?
Those are Sunset Sound preamps.
Yeah, so the left rack of the three racks, the one on the left, you see the kind of orange pieces of gears in the one rack unit. Those are Sunset Sound pre's, right?
That's like the ultimate API preamp, if you will. I liken it has another octave on the top and the bottom. Maybe is the way to look at it. Super, super nice. They were the preamps used in the consoles at Sunset Sound in Hollywood, Studio 3, and in the back room. So a lot of great hit records history at those studios.
Oh yeah. Just a few things recorded there.
By the way, when you go to a party at Sunset Sound. Flip back out. When you go to a party at Sunset Sound and all the studios are playing music that was recorded or mixed there.
Oh, really?
And it goes all night long.
Well, could probably go for about a week with the amount of stuff that's recorded there.
It's awesome. First time, just a quick story. First time I ever was in their parking lot years ago, the Rolling Stones are in the back room and they were working on Tumbling Dice, and they had a limo. And they had a time, somebody told me, it wasn't them, but they told me that they had prearranged a unannounced radio play of the song on the radio, a local station. At a certain time, it would just come on with no announcement or anything. And they were all in the car waiting for it to be transmitted on it.
They're just sitting out in the car?
And, and it came on. And because if you remember that song, the vocal is really tucked, the deuce is still wild and all that stuff, but the vocal is really even lower than the usual Rolling Stones song. And they just want to make sure that it was coming over, but apparently they worked on it there. So it's
that's great. Stuff. Just sitting out in the car waiting for it to come on.
Yeah, Mick and Keith and
that's awesome. So now your gear. Let's talk about the setup and some favorite pieces of gear. Sure. But first off, the setup. This is something we've done several times here. We've had talked about patch bays and mixers and everything. Mm-hmm. Now you have a lot of choice pieces of outboard gear, but you have no mixer. Right. So how are you interfacing this gear, and with your setup?
Okay.
And how would you say integrate that?
So
into your workflow.
So on the left-hand rack there, left of the desk, you'll see the Sigma summing engine. Is that
the one above the above the digis?
The 192, yeah. That has 16 stereo inputs, and it's fed by those two 192s underneath. Okay.
Okay.
So, and then the output of that Sigma, which is analog, is routed to the benchmark media to be converted into digital back into Pro Tools, record back into Pro Tools.
Got it. Okay.
So 32 outputs, or 16 stereo outputs, go into the Sigma from those two 192s.
Right.
All the outboard gear is on the third I/O in the center rack. At the bottom of the center rack on the right is a 1616, and I'll be getting another one pretty soon. All of that gear is on hardware inserts.
Okay.
So when you want to use, say, the stay level, it just comes up like a plug-in.
It's the I/O plug-in, right?
Well, it's called a hardware insert.
Okay. Oh, I'm thinking in Logic it's called the I/O plug-in. Yeah. Okay.
So if I want that stay level on tracks or a bus or whatever, it just comes up like a plug-in.
So in other words, your hardware is your plug-in at that point, right?
It is. And so it's delay compensated. It's an awesome way to work. All you have to do is, the session remembers the patch, and I just take a picture of the front panel and store the pictures with the session.
For recall?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way. And then you have everything, when you're mixing, you're summing out to the SSL, right?
Right. So everything sums to the SSL. It has an insert point. My next purchase will probably be an SSL tube compressor or something for the, but whatever. I mean, that can be anything. There's the Sigma is a fantastic unit, the new version. You can mix faders in it. You can supply it with fader information from Pro Tools. Right now, I leave it all at Unity. It's super quiet. It's pretty awesome sounding, I tell you.
Now, you and I have talked about this before, so I already kind of know how you stand.
Yeah.
And I think you and I actually are kind of in the same boat. We go about it a little differently, but ultimately the same result.
Yeah.
Hardware summing.
That's what it's doing.
Right, and you're pretty much a firm believer in that, right? I mean, to your ears anyway. We won't open the Pandora's box of of what's better.
I just find it's much more flexible to mix on this. It's much more forgiving, just like a console. You're not so concerned in the box. You got one thing that peaks a little bit, and all of a sudden the whole bus peaks.
Right.
And I just
forgiving that's a good word, actually.
It's very much forgiving. It's like an analog board in that respect. So I'm loving it. With this unit, I have 2 stereo buses. I can run one into the other. I can separate into 2 stereo buses if I want to recombine them later, parallel. It's got a monitor path, which I don't use, but it has a monitor path. It has inserts. It's got a lot of features. So I'm really pretty much set on that baby.
A lot of features, but also a fairly simple recall.
Total, don't do anything.
Yeah.
You just turn it on.
Which, then there's me over here, an hour later getting everything patched in.
I mean, right now I'm making all the moves inside of Pro Tools. I use the fader port to ride blocks of 8 or just touch fader.
Actually, let's go back to that real quick. You want to pull that up one more time? Because this is something I remember at the last Tech Breakfast you were talking about. And something I'm actually thinking about getting, so when I am in the box, I don't have it.
It's a Huey, and Pro Tools is using Huey, so it's got the limitations of Huey, 7-bit. The fader port is much more functional with PreSonus Studio One. It's completely factored into that program.
Have you had? But it's
totally
worked pretty well in Pro Tools so far, right?
All I use it for is the transport and the faders, But you can tweak aux sends with it. You can tweak plug-in settings with it. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, but all I use it for is just to be able to grab a fader and make a move on it. Really.
Right. Which, there's something about, at least for me, just I don't know why, but a mouse is so different than a fader.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing this, there's a feel to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but
no, you're right.
For me, it makes me feel better.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's great when you're doing a vocal and comes that part again where he's a little quiet. I see the vocal fader and just grab it, move it, let go.
Boom, right back.
Done. Because there's a lot of stuff you got to do when you're mixing nowadays. I think mixing has become so detailed because you can hear it and people can hear it. So there's so much you can do. So that's what I'm using that thing for. And I had the single fader port, the old one with the one fader.
Yeah.
And I found that very handy. It was right by my trackball. And just trackball's here. The fader port was here. Make the move, back to the trackball. And that works out pretty well if you don't have the space.
Right.
So a little.
Oh yeah, that would. Yeah, you're literally almost just doing this with your hands.
Oh yeah. That's a good one.
That's nice.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk. Let's stay on gear for a second.
All right.
Give me a couple choice pieces of gear, because you review a lot too. I mean, you have a lot of nice stuff there, but I know every once in a while I get a message from you going, "Hey, you got to check this out," or "You got to check this out." What is some stuff this year that you've run across that you think is just bitchin' gear?
I made a list. It's not that long. Well, maybe not. So as I said, the stay level, and then the Retro also makes a really nice piece called a 176, which is a kind of a rendition of the UA 175, another tube. All their stuff is tube. That is really nice. That's one of my next purchase. I like, of course, the Manley stuff. I used one of the first reviews I wrote was called a Manley EQ 500. The EQ 500 is a mic pre with a passive EQ, and it's kind of a rare bird. Now, I haven't made it for years, but it's essentially a. Are you familiar with a Telefunken, the Siemens cassette boxes?
Yep.
What are they called? It's that circuit. It's a push-pull mic circuit into a passive EQ, and then they have a makeup gain, and it's a mic pre.
Mm-hmm.
Really good, really good. And then
the check that out.
Variable mu, everyone knows that one.
Yep.
The variable mu is nice. I also have got the Q2 Audio has an F765, which is the compressor limiter out of a Compex, and it's in a 500 module.
Yeah, that I remember you sent me a message about that one time. That
Very
looks
nice.
fantastic.
A lot of things you can do with that. It's a compressor, it's a limiter. It has a pre-emphasis, like the Warm Audio has a pre-emphasis control, so you can make it squash more on the high frequencies, which works out great for room and overheads if you like that sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a pair of those. Another thing I have is the Eventide Ddl 500, which is an old school digital delay, mono delay. It's in a 500 module.
It is?
Yeah. It's in the picture.
Oh.
You can't see it in that picture. It's in the rack, but I don't know if you can see.
What is
But
it? What is it? What's
it's
the
called
model
a
again?
Even DDL-500. And so it's a hardware in a 500 slot. You know, it's got feedback, it's got tap tempo, it's got all those kind of things, and it's just a sweet sounding. It's not like a plug-in delay at all. There it is. So another product, Eventide. We're on the subject is what they're called their ladder filter.
I'm gonna pull that up real quick. This is the DDL 500 that he's talking about.
So
Man,
that
this
one,
gotta be great, easy for recall too, man.
yeah, you can tap tempo, or you can just dial in the thing. You can times two it. You can do infinite number of repeats. You have a wet, dry. You got a bunch of controls. So I want to get a second one of those because they're just sweet.
I gotta try that out.
It's really nice. Really,
I've been trying to get more into some of the outboard
It's
gear like this.
It's very smooth and unharsh, and so I like it a lot.
I know
Another
what I'm trying out.
Eventide product I like is called the ladder filter. Eventide ladder filter. I'm not sure they're still making this guy, but this is under the heading of sound design. I'm sort of of the opinion that more and more, as far as pop records, they're becoming more sound design projects, meaning that people are creating their own sound specifically for these certain particular records.
Right. That's an interesting way of looking at it, actually.
You know, their own kind of drum sounds, their own guitar sounds. Everything is all exactly designed for that record, for that sound. So I've been getting into a lot of sound design software. There's some really great ones and plugins and such that you can do some really awesome stuff with. So let's see.
What would be one of those plugins?
Well, like for example, Synaptig makes a reverb called Adaptiverb. So you may want to Google that one, Adaptiverb. Z-Y-N-A-P-T-I-Q. Synaptig Adaptiverb. Yeah. So Adaptiverb is a pitch tracking reverb. In other words, yeah, there it is. You can get the demo, but in other words, what it's capable of doing is, the reason why long reverbs are always kind of a mess is because when it goes over the chord change, the reverb from the chord before is dissonant a lot of times.
Right.
So it sounds horrible. So that limits the length of a reverb you can have right there.
Mm-hmm.
What this does is it tracks the pitch, and it changes the pitch of the reverb on the chord change. That's one of the things it can do.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'm just giving you the heads up. You can also make the reverb in harmony with the source if you want. In other words, the reverb can be an octave higher, or it could be a fifth.
I'm gonna have to look into that.
This
sounds like a really cool plugin.
That's a sound design plugin. Another good sound design is a plugin, Eventide's Fission. So Fission separates the sound into the attack portion and the sustain portion lets you do separate modification on each one of those sections and recombine them. If that makes sense, that sentence I just made.
Yes.
So Fission is a sound design plugin, and it's awesome. So
holy crap, man.
So I know it looks tweaky, but it has a lot of really great presets. It's not complicated. You'll get it in a minute. You have two parts of it. You have the processor on top, processes the transient, in other words, the attack portion only, and you can apply certain effects to only the attack. And the bottom one is a tonal. So tonal is a sustain part. So perhaps you want to do like a harmonizer effect or a chorus effect or something on the tonal, but on the attack you want to do something else.
Oh, cool. It is interesting that you point that out. Now that I think about it, so much of the pop stuff does feel more sound design than the rock is just so you kind of get it out there, you get a cool thing, and you go for it. But
it's a big part of a lot of the records I'm hearing, and I love it. I'm into it.
Yeah, the control seems like it's down just to every single thing. Where like a rock thing, we might throw the reverb up, and you don't really care about the tail.
Different, a different experience, a different thing, and I love that too. It's just that what I'm hearing on the radio are some, really some pretty cool stuff.
Right. That's interesting.
So lastly is Neutron Advance. Maybe you have that one. Neutron Advance, which again is a powerful plugin, allows you to actually look at two sources and sculpt one against the other. For example, trying to get the kick and the bass to fit to one another. So
this?
Yeah. So it has a masking. Masking is where one set of frequency covers another, and this is
I
able
remember
to.
You talking about this plugin. I still haven't checked that out though.
So again, more sound design stuff, and that's kind of what I'm into lately. With plugins, because essentially plugins. I look to a plugin to do stuff I can't do with analog.
Right.
That's the reason. That's the thing. EQs and compressors. Yeah, it's kind of hard to have 50 compressors in your studio.
Right. Yeah. And even EQ is kind of the same way. Although, the console, but I don't do kind of some of the same kind of pop stuff as you do. But the one thing I do like about the digital stuff is some of the finite control you can have that you just can't.
Yeah.
Analog isn't necessarily designed to do that anyway.
Well, this is a recording console primarily. Mm-hmm. So you got people playing out there, and you go, hey, look, I need that brighter. Okay, done. You can't really start reinventing the wheel while somebody's playing out there. The focus of a recording studio is to record.
Right.
It's not a listening studio. It's a recording studio. So you gotta, my big thing about the recording studio is, come on, let's capture a performance. Let's just get it captured. Let's get it recorded. You're using a high pass filter maybe sometimes because something is booming too much, or that maybe that's all you do at that time. So that's what a recording console is about, and that's why EQs like that are really important too. So this stuff is plugins and all that is more like really studying something to really get it a certain way, and hovering over it and fussing with it, and tweaking it. So
yeah, you can to a level that you just can't quite get to.
You're trying to make something that is irresistible and compelling for someone to listen to. That's when I listen to this, do I really want to hear all of it? Do I want to get past the first chorus and keep listening, or am I out by the first the first pre-chorus? I'm out of there. That's how I judge.
That starts with a good song.
Yeah, a good song. Yeah.
Without a good song, it doesn't really matter what else you do.
So, anyway,
that's some good pieces of gear right there, though. I'm gonna look at that.
Adapted.
The DDL 500.
Nice stuff.
That is something.
I want to get another one. That thing is handy. It just sits there and works. I have it on insert, and sometimes I send to it like a regular plug. Like a reverb.
Right.
I send to it.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Nice. Let's see, what else did we have on our list here? We had a lot. Well, there's one subject we're not even going to touch on today. We're going to do I don't know if you follow him at all. He's really good with some room acoustic stuff, and we're gonna do a whole other thing a quarter from now about that.
Yeah.
Because that's a subject that we got to get to on its own.
Yeah, well, I teach that at MI. It's the only class I really teach is project studio design. So it's a big interest to students. I mean, it's about converting an existing space into a viable studio is basically it. So a spare bedroom, an office, a lounge. In my case, at my place, that room you saw in the pictures is what used to be my dining room. So it's not very big. And
but it sounds good. That time I came over there,
oh yeah,
the way you dialed it in, that thing sounds fantastic in there.
It's been a lot of work and learning. I kind of learned a lot about all of this stuff in the process of doing that and in writing the course. So big interest to me, all that, because essentially if your room sucks, no matter what you do, it's just not. It's only going to get so good, and not very good then.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the good room acoustics is when you collaborate with somebody and they come over to work with you, or just you're working for them or mixing for them, it sounds good to them too. It's not like you're making apologies. Oh, really? You can't have the bass that loud, or if the bass, you can't make those kind of apologies.
Right. No. I've been there, and I can. You're so right.
You can't.
The second you do it,
then it's like
they're trusting you. Things just go downhill from there.
It's the professionalism, So anyway,
we got a couple questions here.
All right.
First,
Bring it on.
Regal Beagle Studios. Hey, welcome back, guys. Good to see you. Any hardware on your two bus? Which I think that's going to be one of your next purchases.
I want to buy an SSL. The SSL, the one rack space, is kind of my plan. Right now, everything comes back into Pro Tools, and I put it through DMG's Limitless, which is another plugin I highly recommend, by the way. It's called Limitless.
Cool. From DMG, the
DMG
company?
Audio,
okay.
Yeah. My favorite plug-in company right now, they make an EQ called Equality, which is a AAX DSP.
Okay.
A minimum phase plug-in, and then they make Limitless, which is an awesome mastering, and it's got loudness measurement in it and everything. It's really good.
Oh, cool. All right. I'm gonna have to pull that up in a second.
You can dial it as loud as you want. If that's what you're after. Oh, you can.
Which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
too.
you can make it, and it sounds good too. That's the bottom line. You can get up there -9.
David wants to know. See if you could explain exactly how the outboard gear delay compensated to be used in real time. Where is that happening?
In Pro Tools.
Because I know Logic has automatic compensation too.
Well, essentially, delay compensation delays everything by the longest delay.
Right. Do you have to ping that and set it?
No,
or
not in Pro Tools.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, same in Logic then.
No, it's not like old Cubase in Nuendo. They had that. You ping, and it would send a ping around.
Yep.
And
then you'd have to set it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Pro Tools, it's automatic now. You just hook it up, and you can change it too if you feel like you're delayed through, maybe you're going through some kind of processor that has inherent delay in it, so you need more. In Pro Tools, there's a slider where you can actually
cool.
You can actually change.
And that works really well because I've done it in Pro Tools and in Logic.
The only thing I would say about it is when you're looking at the gain reduction, sometimes the meter is not in sync with what you're hearing because it's having to put that track ahead of what you're hearing, so that it ends up
right. Yeah, the metering isn't compensated.
Yes, but I don't look at that. I don't look at that, but it works great.
I remember the first time I saw that, man. I was like, "What the?" My brain was just like, "What is going on?"
No, you don't want to look at that. No, you don't look at that.
Yeah. Okay, I got one more question I want to go through here. This has been a lot of good stuff here. For new engineers, now you get to shape a lot of engineers or help shape a lot coming through MI. And I know even outside of there, because I had a couple ex-drum students that ended up being students of yours, and you helped them with their room a little bit. Mm-hmm. What is some advice, based on your experience with all the students you've seen, that you would give to someone that wants to get into engineering?
Oh, okay. I think a lot of students lose sight that it's a service-oriented business. When you're starting out, you really sort of have to be kind of there but invisible, at least when you're starting out in an assistant position. I mean, that's an intern or an assistant engineer. I mean, in studios, I mean, I started as a toilet technician, to be honest with you, is the way I started.
Really?
Oh yeah. $50 a week, and this is a long time ago.
I remember Adam Mosley told me he started out the tea boy at Trident Studios, making tea for people.
Yeah. Well, that's where you start out, because essentially you're not trusted until you can clean the toilet well. And if you do that well, then maybe you can sweep up or pick up after a session. Do that well, okay, then maybe you can wrap up cables, And when I came up, the flow was, toilet technician, and then they had a mono disc cutter. Used to cut acetates for publishing demos before cassettes or anything. They would cut them on. So every day there would be a stack of tapes. So that was really a really good training ground as far as like playing tapes and seeing what works, try to set levels. I had a Neumann mono lathe, a Fairchild, and I think a Pultec, and you just saw what works and what doesn't work. Oh shit, if I got it too loud or compressed it wrong, it would go out of the groove, and those acetates are expensive, at the time, so
You learned that really fast.
Yeah, you learn
didn't
really
you?
quickly, but essentially that's what you did all day. You cut these song demos, and if you were doing that well, and there was something in the studio needed another body in there, then you went in there and started setting up sessions and learning about mics and plugging in. So in school, they kind of give it to you all at once, and I think some students get the impression that this is the way it is all the time, and and so. Yeah, I know about a U87, and I said, well, did you know this? And they go, no. And so there's an awful lot to learn, and the other thing that I think students think, if I take a year of this, I'm a recording engineer. And that's a fallacy, too. It's something you have to kind of say,
I think you're not a recording engineer till you had to be the psychologist in a session dealing with multiple personalities.
It does, yeah. That's
because all of a sudden the key commands, the gear, all of that becomes so secondary to the success of the session.
You can be, if you're a really nice guy and you get along with the artist and you get along with the producer, you could be terrible at Pro Tools, slow, make mistakes, lose stuff, But if you're their guy, I mean, I can tell you stories about the famous people that got gigs, ended up, living in Malibu because they just got along with the right people and weren't particularly talented or knew that much. The hang was good.
Yep. And that's often what it comes down to. It's can you hang with the artist?
It's the hang, and it's a service oriented. You have to kind of anticipate a need, is what I say. So when you're in a session, hey, they usually eat around 6 or 7 for dinner. If you're the assistant or the gopher or whatever, well, guess what? You have the menu book out by, half hour before they like to eat.
Right.
So they're looking at the menu. You're anticipating this need, or they start at 10 in the morning, and usually at around 1 or 2, they break and set up for vocals or whatever their drill is. So
it's paying attention to those things, though. You can't just sit back in the back, my job's done for now, I'm going to go play a game or something.
You're watching if the engineer is having trouble with a patch or something. You're right there. You're not saying, let me do it. Or you're not saying, you don't know what you're doing. You go, want me to get that for you? You want me to patch the mic or whatever? And, there's a whole kind of like give and take about, not embarrassing somebody that's new at the studio that may not know where everything is. You kind of have to be careful about that. I mean, I've been in studios, like I was at the Village a couple of years ago, and the second engineer had the chip on his shoulder because he got pulled off a Smashing Pumpkins date to do this session with me. And of course, number one, that made me feel great. Number two, I wouldn't have mind, but he didn't even set up the board correctly. We were doing a tracking date, and he had the mics sourced from. He had the headphones mix sourced from the mics. Follow me?
So he was mad about getting at someone else for getting pulled up session and took it out on you.
Something like that. Yeah. But anyway, being first engineer, I just I didn't say anything. I just took the bull by the horns, built the Q mix in Pro Tools, and said put it out there, and it was like you can't really go after that stuff, and he ended up kind of pretty much staying in the corner for the whole week.
Probably for the better. I mean, if it's gonna have to be there, at least that's out of the way, right? He's out of the way.
Yeah. You know, not gonna get in my way.
Yeah. Well, Barry, thank you.
Whoa, we're done already.
Yeah, we're 48 minutes.
Awesome.
Goes fast.
Okay.
We're gonna come back and do the acoustic thing though.
Oh yeah. Acoustic.
Yeah, because that you can't just touch on that a piece. You know, we need to have a little bit of time.
Yeah, setting up your room is.
And I have a handful of questions I already know that I can lay out like for you ahead of time.
A bunch of things, and actually, you can get a great sound in any room. There's just some rules and certain awareness of certain things you have to have, and the expectation. So we'll do
but
it.
it's taking the time to do that too. You know you have to, if you're gonna do something, you have to.
You need
invest a little bit at least.
Yeah, you have to. Well, just being aware of what has to happen in
Because otherwise,
shape of the room.
and like you said earlier, it won't matter what gear you have in there because your result, you could have the best mics and converters that money can buy in a bad room. You're just going to record a bad room really well.
Yeah. You'll have an awesome bad room sound.
Yes. Well, hey, and that maybe if that's what you're going for, killer. I don't know. That's my thing, but
We'll do it whenever you want.
Yeah, maybe next break from MI.
Oh, sooner if you want.
Oh,
figure it out.
We're gonna do it sooner then. All right, cool. Thank you, Barry. Tao, congratulations, Holmes. Welcome to America. Well, you've been here a while, but now officially. And we will see you guys next Wednesday. Have a good one, folks.